Arthur's family truth. The call came at 6:04 that morning. I saw his name on the screen, my son-in-law. He had never called me that early. Not once. I picked up. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't explain anything. He just said one line, "Don't come home." Then the call ended. I didn't react. I just sat there, the phone still in my hand. The line already dead, but one word stayed with me. "Not her, not my daughter," he said. My name is Clifford Harmon. I turned 68 that morning. And by the time the sun came up, I already knew that call wasn't the beginning. It was the end of something. Let me go back to the night before. Because that call didn't start in the morning. It started at dinner. Carolyn arrived at exactly 6 p.m. She always did, same as me. With her was Russell Page. He sat down across from me and waited. He shook my hand. His grip was firm, but it didn't change, not once. His smile stayed the same too. His smile didn't move. Not once. He sat down across from me and waited. Carolyn started first. She poured my wine, filled it again before I finished. Then she asked about the house. Casually, too casually. Russell didn't interrupt. He just watched. When I answered, he leaned forward. Just a little, then leaned back. Like he was filing something away. He didn't ask questions directly. He circled them, came back to the same places. My health, the paperwork. Whether I was managing everything alone, Carolyn followed his lead softer, but the same pattern. She asked about my attorney, about documents, where I kept things. I kept my answers vague and smiled. That's when I noticed Patrick. He hadn't touched his food, not once. Every time Carolyn spoke, his jaw tightened. His hand gripped the edge of the table, then let go, then gripped again. He kept looking at her, then away, like he was waiting for something to happen, or hoping it wouldn't. I've seen that look before, not on suspects, on witnesses, people who knew something but hadn't said it yet. After dinner, Carolyn guided me to the living room, the armchair with its back to the hallway, while she kept me talking about nothing in particular. Russell excused himself, said he needed the bathroom, turned right out of the dining room instead of left. Toward my office. I noted the time, 8:47 p.m. He came back at 8:53, 6 minutes, that was all. He went in at 8:47, came back at 8:53. Nothing in his hands. Nothing on his face. Like he hadn't done anything at all. I said nothing, but I slipped my phone out of my jacket and typed a message to Arthur Gideon. Arthur Gideon. 20 years, he picked up on the first ring. Something's off tonight. Have the trust documents ready. I may need to sign before morning. His reply came in under 90 seconds. Already prepared. Standing by whenever you need. I put the phone away and went back to listening to Carolyn talk about her company's expansion plans. Then I saw my wallet on the coffee table, open. Carolyn standing over it. She looked up, smiled, said she had a headache and was looking for aspirin. The aspirin has been in my bathroom medicine cabinet since Carolyn was a teenager. She'd taken it 100 times for stress headaches during high school. She knew exactly where it was. I took the wallet back calmly. Our fingers didn't touch. I matched her smile with one of my own. After they left, I checked the wallet in the hallway under the light. My driver's license was in the wrong slot. I'd kept it in the front pocket for 15 years. Now it was in the back. My social security card had been moved to the front, and the folded personal check I kept as a quick signature reference gone. She had my ID, my SSN, my signature sample. The 3 things a skilled forger needs to become you on paper. I walked to my office, closed the door, and called Arthur. The trust documents were 32 pages. I signed everyone digitally, methodically, the same way I used to work a fraud case. No rushing, no skipping steps. My house at 2.1 million investment portfolio at 1.2 million retirement accounts totaling $750. Everything, all $4.5 million transferred into a revocable living trust with Arthur Gideon named as successor trustee. Arthur's text came at 11:58 p.m., filed. Trust is active. Call me at 7 a.m. We need to talk. She had the keys. I'd already changed the locks. I went to bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay there in the dark in the house Margaret and I had shared for 35 years, listening to the quiet and waited for morning. It didn't take long. At 6:04 a.m., Patrick's call lasted 11 seconds. By 6:06, I was already dressed. I didn't go home. That was the hardest part, sitting with the knowledge of what was happening and choosing not to move. But Patrick said they'll be finished by evening, which meant there was a window, a timeline, and if I walked back in too early, I'd ruin the only advantage I had. They didn't know I knew. I called Arthur at 7 a.m. sharp. He picked up on the first ring. His voice had an edge I hadn't heard before, not worried, exactly. More like a man who had found something he wasn't expecting and was choosing his words carefully. "The trust filed clean last night," he said. "You're protected. But Clifford, I found something else. Someone pulled your full property title history at 11:47 p.m. from your home IP address. I was in bed by 11:30. I said so. I know, which means whoever did it was using your Wi-Fi after you went upstairs." A pause. Russell's 6-minute bathroom break. It landed exactly the way I expected it to. I'd spent 35 years connecting dots like this. The difference was that this time, the dots spelled out my own daughter's name. "There's more," Arthur said. "A mobile notary appointment. Scheduled in your name at your address for 2 p.m. today. You didn't book it." I hadn't. I told him so. Someone did. And based on what I'm looking at, here's what I think they're bringing. A power of attorney granting Carolyn full control of your finances and property. And a medical evaluation. What kind of evaluation? The kind that says you're not fit to manage your own affairs. I sat with that for a moment. Outside, the November light was just starting to come through Margaret's kitchen window, hitting the garden she'd planted 40 years ago. Her roses were bare this time of year, but the bones of the bush were still there, still holding. A fabricated medical report. Someone had paid a doctor to put my name on a piece of paper declaring me mentally incompetent. That was the foundation of the whole plan, not just stealing my assets, but erasing my ability to fight back. Make me a man who on paper couldn't even object. "Who's the doctor?" I asked. "Norman Stokes. You saw him once 18 months ago for a routine physical." I had never been back. I barely remembered the man's face. "Arthur told me to stay away from the house. Let the trust documents do their work. Call the police and let them handle the rest." I thanked him and told him I'd think about it. I wasn't going to think about it. I drove to a coffee shop and sat there for 4 hours. Ordered coffee I didn't drink. Watched people come and go, living their normal Tuesday, while I ran through every angle of what was coming. The plan was clean on the surface. Carolyn had my signature sample, my ID, my social security number, everything needed to forge a power of attorney that looked legitimate. Dr. Stokes' evaluation would provide the legal cover. A concerned daughter stepping in to manage the affairs of a father showing signs of cognitive decline. The mobile notary would make it official. By evening, on paper, I wouldn't own anything. I wouldn't even be considered capable of owning anything. What they didn't know was that the trust I'd signed at 11th or the night before had already made every document they were about to forge worthless. You can't transfer property that's held in trust without the trustee's authorization. Arthur wasn't going to authorize anything. They'd be signing heir. But I needed to see it. I needed to see my daughter standing in my driveway, directing the operation, because until I saw it with my own eyes, some part of me was still hoping I'd gotten it wrong. At 1:45 p.m., I paid for the coffee I hadn't touched and walked to my car. I turned onto my street at 2:15 p.m., 15 minutes after the notary was scheduled to arrive. The moving truck was the first thing I saw. White cab, green lettering parked straight across my driveway. Back doors open. 2 men in gray work shirts carrying boxes down my front steps, calling out to each other about weight and stack order. Professional. Efficient. They had no idea what they were part of. The boxes were labeled in black marker. Living room, office files, kitchen M. Harmon. Margaret's name. Reduced to a sorting category on the side of a cardboard box. I pulled over 3 houses down and sat for a moment. Then I saw it through the living room window. 2 men wrapping Margaret Steinway grand piano in moving blankets. That piano had sat in front of the bay window for 35 years. Margaret played it every evening. Debussy in spring, Chopin in the winter, show tunes when she was feeling light. After she died, I kept it tuned and clean. Never played it myself. Couldn't, but I wasn't ready to let anyone else touch it either. Watching strangers bundle it up like furniture they'd been hired to move, that hit me somewhere different than the legal documents had. I got out of the car. Carolyn was on the porch with a clipboard, phone pressed to her ear, directing the operation with the same efficiency she brought to her company. She was wearing the coat I'd complimented at dinner the night before. She saw me. The clipboard dropped to her side. The color left her face. Her mouth opened and formed a word she didn't say out loud. Standing beside her was a young woman I didn't recognize, early 30s, pressed blouse, county-issued ID badge around her neck. A portable notary stamp sat on the porch railing next to her. She was looking between me and Carolyn with the expression of someone who had just realized she'd walked into something she hadn't been told the full story about. I walked up the front steps. "Show me the documents," I said. Carolyn handed me the clipboard. Her fingers were shaking. The first document was a durable power of attorney. My name at the top. My signature at the bottom, close but not right. The H was too rounded. The pressure was wrong in 3 places. After 35 years of examining forged documents, I could see it in under a minute. Behind it was a 2-page medical evaluation, signed by Dr. Norman Stokes, dated 3 weeks prior. The diagnosis read, early cognitive decline with rapid progression, patient unable to reliably manage financial or legal affairs, immediate intervention recommended. I had seen this exact document structure before. I had investigated cases where families used fabricated evaluations to strip elderly parents of their autonomy, their savings, their homes. I had testified in court about how it worked. I had helped put people in prison for it. And now someone had paid to have it done to me. I looked up at Carolyn. "I haven't seen Dr. Stokes in 18 months. She didn't answer. The notary, the young woman with the county badge, stepped forward. Her voice was thin. "Mr. Harmon, I was told everything was pre-verified. Mr. Page said you had early dementia and your daughter had full medical authorization to. Who hired you, Mr. Page?" "Russell Page. He said it was a family matter and all the paperwork was in order." I took out my phone and photographed every page, both documents, front and back. The notary stamp sitting on the railing. I got it all. Then I looked at her. "Call him," she hesitated. "Put it on speaker. I want to hear what he says." Her hands were shaking worse than Carolyn's. She found the number and pressed call. Russell Page's voice came through clear and smooth. Still in salesman mode. "Sylvia, is it done? Did she sign the papers?" I leaned toward the phone. "It's not done, Russell." And nobody signed anything. Silence. Long enough that I could hear traffic somewhere on his end. When he spoke again, the polish was completely gone, flat and cold. "Mr. Harmon, this is unexpected. I imagine it is. I signed my trust documents last night. Everything you were planning to take is already protected. I have photographs of every forged document you prepared." I paused. "I'd suggest calling your lawyer." The line went dead. The 2 movers looked at each other, then at Carolyn, then started walking back toward their truck. One of them was already on his phone, probably calling his dispatcher. They loaded back up and drove away without a word. Sylvia Warren stood on my porch crying, mascara running, saying she was sorry. She didn't know she would cooperate with anyone who needed her testimony. I told her to get a lawyer of her own and to stay available. She nodded and left. Carolyn hadn't moved. She was standing in the doorway of the house she grew up in, holding the clipboard against her chest like a shield. The confidence from the night before was completely gone. What was left underneath it looked like exhaustion. "Dad," her voice was down to almost nothing. "I can explain. The company is in trouble," I said. It wasn't a question. She looked at me. 1.2 M in loans. 3 major contracts fell through in the last 8 months. Bank called in additional collateral. Today was the deadline. I'd had Arthur dig into the company financials that morning while I sat in the coffee shop. "You personally guaranteed those loans, Carolyn. Your house, your credit, everything. You were going under and you needed a life raft." Her eyes filled up. "Russell said it was temporary. He said once the company stabilized, we'd pay everything back. He said you'd never even. He said a lot of things." She stopped. I walked past her into the house to see what they'd already taken. What came out over the following 2 weeks was worse than I'd built it up to be in my head, and I'd built it up to be pretty bad. Patrick had found Russell's laptop at their house after Russell disappeared. He spent 3 days going through it and brought everything to Arthur and me laid out in a folder like a case file. 2 years of messages between Russell and Carolyn, an affair that had started as professional admiration and turned into something Carolyn genuinely believed was love. Reading those messages was its own kind of pain. Watching my daughter write to a man about her future, about finally feeling seen, about how she thought about him constantly. Then the bank records. $420 moved to offshore accounts over 18 months. in amounts just under the federal reporting threshold. She'd learned that pattern watching me work when she was younger. I taught her how fraud investigators spot structuring. She'd used it to structure her own transfers. One-way plane tickets to Grand Cayman. 2 of them. Carolyn's name and Russell Page's name, departing in 3 days from the original date. And then Patrick pulled up a name I didn't recognize, Lorraine Vance, 34 years old, Denver real estate developer. She'd become involved with a man matching Russell's description 2 years before Carolyn did. Same pattern: professional relationship, romantic involvement, financial manipulation, company collapse. Lorraine had booked a trip to Grand Cayman 3 years ago. She never came home. The FBI had an open missing persons file on her. Last confirmed location, a resort on the island. After that, nothing. I sat at my kitchen table, looking at Lorraine Vance's photograph for a long time. Carolyn hadn't been planning to start a new life with Russell Page. She'd been led, step by step, toward the same destination where another woman had disappeared. The offshore accounts, the one-way ticket, the island. Russell wasn't running away with my daughter. He was getting rid of a loose end. She had no idea. The trial ran 3 days. Arthur had packaged everything cleanly: the forged power of attorney, the fabricated medical evaluation, the offshore transfers, the emails proving Russell had personally contacted Carolyn's clients and advised them to pull their contracts. He'd spent 18 months engineering her company's collapse, not because the business was failing, because he needed her desperate enough to do what he asked. Dr. Norman Stokes was called first. He lasted about 10 minutes on the stand before he fell apart completely. He'd never examined me, never spoken to me. Russell had handed him pre-filled documents and wired $12,000 to an account connected to his gambling debts 2 days before Stokes signed the evaluation. The prosecutor didn't even have to push hard. The man had clearly been carrying it for weeks. Sylvia Warren cooperated fully, as promised. She walked the jury through exactly how Russell had hired her, what he'd told her, and what she'd been instructed to do if I showed up. Her testimony closed the loop on the notary piece. Then the prosecutor called Gloria Page. Russell's wife walked into that courtroom like someone who had already done the hardest part, which was deciding to come at all. She was in her early 40s, auburn hair composed in the way that people are when they've run out of tears and what's left is just clarity. She and Russell had been married 12 years, 2 kids, a house in Seattle. She'd believed he was building a business in Portland 3 days a week. Russell stood up when she entered. His attorney pulled him back down. Gloria testified for 40 minutes. She described 12 years of a marriage she'd believed was real. She talked about her kids. Their daughter was 10, her son was 8. She said her son still practiced basketball in the driveway because he wanted to be like his dad. She said that while she was waiting for Russell to come home on Sunday nights, he was in Portland telling my daughter he loved her and building a plan to take her to the same island where Lorraine Vance had disappeared. She looked at Russell once during the whole thing, just once, didn't say a word, didn't need to. I watched Carolyn's face when Gloria walked in. I watched her understand, in real time, that the man she had burned her entire life down for had a wife and 2 children he'd never mentioned. That every conversation about their future together had been constructed from start to finish. That she hadn't been his partner. She'd been his next job. Carolyn took the stand on the 3rd day. She told them everything: the affair, the transfers, the documents she'd signed knowing they were forged, telling herself it was temporary, telling herself she'd fix it later, the $12,000 to Dr. Stokes that she'd withdrawn from an account Russell had opened in her name. She said she'd signed the power of attorney because Russell told her it was the only way to save the company, the only way to keep what they'd built together, and that her father would understand once things stabilized. Then she turned and looked directly at me. She said she knew sorry wasn't enough. She said she knew it didn't give me back the daughter I thought I had. She said she was sorry anyway, not because she wanted anything from me, but because I deserved to hear it. I sat in that courtroom and couldn't find a single word to give her back. The verdicts came after 6 hours of deliberation. Russell Page, guilty on all counts. Fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, financial elder abuse. The judge sentenced him to 14 years federal, with additional murder charges pending after the FBI recovered Lorraine Vance's remains from behind a rental property Russell had owned in Grand Cayman. Dr. Stokes, 3 years, medical license revoked permanently, $50,000 fine. Carolyn, 5 years probation, suspended sentence, full restitution of $4.05 million. As the bailiffs moved to take Russell out, he turned toward Carolyn and said it was all her fault, said she was too weak to finish what they'd started. That was the last thing he said before they walked him through the door. It was also the most honest thing he'd ever said in front of me. That night, I came home to a dark house. There was an envelope tucked into the door frame, no stamp, no return address, just my name in handwriting I recognized immediately. Margaret's. My hands weren't steady when I opened it. A note from Arthur's firm was paperclipped to the front, to be delivered when Harold needs it most. Margaret had written the letter 6 months before she died, when she still had the strength to hold a pen. 3 pages, her handwriting getting smaller toward the end when her hands tired. My dearest Clifford, she wrote, I know our daughter. I know the hunger in her that was never quite satisfied, and I know that someday she may break your heart. When that day comes, remember, enabling is not love, but neither is abandonment. Find the middle path, that is where healing lives. She had known. Somehow she'd seen what I'd missed for years, and she'd left me a map. I sat at her piano for a long time that night. Eventually I lifted the lid and pressed middle C. The note hung in the empty room. Then I played the first chord she ever taught me, E minor, her favorite. The sound moved through the house like something coming back to life. 6 months later, I drove to the cemetery. I was standing at Margaret's grave with a handful of her deep red roses when I heard footsteps on the path. Carolyn stopped a few feet away. We didn't say anything for a while. She set her flowers next to mine, stepped back. I'm working on it, she said quietly. I know, I said. We stood there until it got cold. Then we both left. That evening, Patrick and Dorothy came for dinner. The house smelled like rosemary chicken, Margaret's recipe, the card still in her handwriting in the kitchen drawer. Dorothy called me Dad for the first time when she walked in. Patrick opened the wine. We sat around the table and talked like people who'd been through something hard together and were still standing. Before they left, Dorothy held my hands and said thank you. For her life, for her son, for being worth the trouble. I told her I wasn't sure I'd earned that. She said sometimes surviving is enough. Sometimes it's everything. She was right. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I could hear Margaret saying the same thing, with that particular tone she used when she'd already told me something once and was waiting for me to catch up. I locked the front door, walked to the living room, and sat down at her piano. I played until the house felt full again. They came for my house, my money, and my mind. They got none of it, but the thing I almost lost and couldn't have put a number on was still sitting right there at the piano, waiting for me to come back to it. The names in this story have been changed. Some details have been adjusted for narrative clarity. The core events are real.